All right, well, welcome everybody. I appreciate you being here. We're going to talk about how to have a healthy sales pipeline. I'm Mike Fritsch with Prometheus Performance Systems, and I've been doing consulting and business consulting for 20 plus years. Um, Worked with, know a lot of you and worked with a number of companies. I need to make sure that this slide share starts back into behaving. So forgive me, there we go. My background, I started out in applied materials, spent a number of years there and ran a number of business units. So served as a general manager with some fairly large businesses. Began consulting and have consulted with a whole range of companies from small, medium-sized businesses to Fortune 50 enterprises. And part of that is always centered around operations, and a lot of it has had to do with sales operations. And so I'm going to take some of those best practices and learnings from that experience and share with you kind of my thoughts and approach on having a healthy sales pipeline. So what we'll talk about today is really what are some of the common frustrations that folks typically have with their sales pipeline, and then take you through 3 steps to make that better. So the first is, what do you do to define your pipeline? The next is we'll talk about important sales metrics. And then I'll talk about the concept of using a control tower so that you can really hone in on the health of your pipeline, see where you're at, and really run your sales operations. And then talk a little bit about next steps. I'll give you a few tips on how to assess your own pipeline. So some of the common frustrations that I've seen with companies of all sizes, and I'll be curious if any of you have experienced these, but typically we might have some poor visibility into the pipeline, maybe performance is inconsistent or unpredictable. A lot of folks face surprises at the end of the month or quarter. And one of my favorites is a disagreement over the facts. So this is more in the larger organizations. You sit down and people go, no, those aren't the numbers. My numbers say this. Typically, you might have a lot of manual work, a lot of meetings, or you spend sometimes more time trying to find the answers than you are working on your sales. And I'm just curious, anybody else experience that or have any comments on that? Is that something that you've seen in your own business or your own consulting?
Just go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I spent, even though I'm a finance person, I spend a lot of time, usually where, it's going to end up in finance. If it's not correct in your CRM and your sales pipeline, it's going to end up in your financials, in your projections. So we spend significant amount of time, and Mike, because I tried to bring you in for this, right. One customer that sold, but we spent significant amount of time just cleaning up the CRM, and we don't do it ourselves in finance, but definitely I see it all the time. You either don't have a CRM, and that's an opportunity to do it well from the beginning, or you have one and it's usually a spaghetti bowl and it's messy. That's been my experience with small businesses.
Yeah, I think that's true. And even larger firms, they may have a CRM, but sometimes it doesn't quite fit the business. And if folks aren't using it, then it might be a great tool, but without a common understanding, without some discipline, then it doesn't do any good. So here's my perspective of how you can make that right. And again, first step is to define your pipeline. And so, I often talk with folks and it's, what's in your pipeline? So do you know what's in that sales pipeline? And fundamentally it comes down to, are you measuring something or are you guessing? A lot of times I think people are really guessing, and Guessing might be, well, I kind of know what it is. I've got intuition. My sales folks have lots of experience. And so, yeah, when they know a deal's going to close, they know it. So, you know, that's all good. But I think having a more concrete and deliberate method is usually the most repeatable thing. And one of my favorite consultants, one of my favorite experts is Peter Drucker. You know, and the quote that I always love is, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So without having some solid ways to track what's going on, it's hard to know where you're at, hard to know where you're going, and hard to get any better. And so, you know, when I think about a sales pipeline and the importance of that to your business from the standpoint of cash flow, from the standpoint of revenue, and for Brigitte's clients, who are normally startups, from the importance of all of that plus your valuation, I think in terms of that cycle time from capturing a lead all the way to getting paid. And so to kind of get your handle around that, I think there's 6 key steps. I look at a pipeline and talk about the stages that something goes through. So you need to name the stage so you know everybody knows what you're talking about. You need to define it. You need to understand the timing of it. You need to understand the success rate. So as you progress through a stage, how often does a prospect turn into a paying customer, and how often does it fall out of that particular stage? And from that, then you need to feed metrics so that you can really see what's going on. And then I always say it's refine, improve, repeat. So all of this is always a continuous improvement process, because your business is constantly changing, your customers are changing. And so just what you established, you know, a year ago or 2 years ago may be fantastic, it may fit, but likely it could use a little bit of refinement. And hopefully you've learned some things, you know, over the last quarter, 2 quarters, or year, and that you want to incorporate those in. And so here's an example of defining your sales stages. And this is an example that we use in our own business. So more from a consulting perspective. But we go through these stages. We like to number them up until it's won or lost. But we start with the lead identification. So when is there a potential deal? When have you seen something and you've got a lead capture? Now, depending on your business, that could be incoming traffic to a website. It could be, you know, somebody responding to an advertisement. It might be, if you're a consultant, it might be you're doing some research on LinkedIn or elsewhere, or you went to a networking event and there was somebody that says, oh, they could probably benefit from, you know, what I do. So to us, that's identifying the lead, and we've started the process. The next stage is we move into what we call prospect. And that's where we understand the value that we think we can deliver to that prospect. And we've reached out to them. So it's like, hey, we had a potential. Now we've reached out to somebody and we're in contact with them. Our next stage we call assessment. And that's when we've actually engaged. So we've had a meeting with them. We understand their needs. They understand what we can do for them, and there's still interest. Okay. That may take a while, and we move into what we call as the next, for us, the next stage is proposal. And that's where we formally issued a proposal. So we say, okay, we understand what you're looking for, how we can help you. Here is the thing that you can say yes to and buy so that we can engage and make something happen. And then after that, because we work with a lot of Fortune 50 companies, we actually track going into the contract stage, because with large organizations, it can sometimes be really, really bureaucratic to get onboarded as a supplier. You go through purchasing, you go through legal, you've got to do this NDA, you've got to do all these things. And sometimes that can take, 6 weeks or so. And so we consider that an important stage. It's almost won, but until the deal's done, for us, we don't call it won. And then closed won is once the deal has been accepted and the paperwork is complete and we have a PO or a commitment in place. So those are the 5 stages that we use in our business. And of course, for your business, it may well be different. You may have fewer stages, you may have more, but it's important to identify those, name them. And then the reason the definition is so important is because if you have 4 different salespeople and they're all using a different concept of what it means to be in each stage, then when you roll up that information, it's not going to be the same. You're not going to do the classic apples to apples. Anywhere along the pipeline, you may lose a deal, and so that's closed loss in our parlance. And that's where we either get a no, or X number of weeks have passed where we get ghosted. And what we've found for our process, and you would make your own decisions, is if all of a sudden a prospect goes cold, rather than keep that in the pipeline, what we found is better is to say it's lost, put them into a follow-up tickler so that your data is always clean. Because if you have, let's say you've got somebody that was in the proposal phase and then you don't hear from them and you leave them there for 3 months, whenever you roll up these numbers, you're going to have somebody in that phase that probably shouldn't be there. And then the last thing is less of a sales stage, but it's important to track, and that is what we call cash received. And for us, that's the first payment we received from the client. And so that gives us that entire cycle from the time the opportunity is identified to when we actually get some payment, get money. And so that's very important from cash flow. That's very important from a finance perspective. On the right, finally, what we do, and we think is a best practice, is for each of those defined stages, we define a probability of that deal going through. And when we do math roll-ups, we take the deal size times the probability, and that's our forecast for revenue that will come from that. And so that's where you're integrating your sales management with your revenue or financial forecast. And so, I mean, to make it easy, let's say our average deal size is $100. When we're at stage 1, we'll have $10 in the pipeline from that deal. Stage 2, we'd have $25. Stage 3, $50, so on and so forth. And so for us, that's a really good way to get everybody on the same sheet of music and to quantify where we are in that sales process and to understand the impact that that has from a financial and cash flow perspective. So let me pause there before I move into the important metrics and just ask for, first, any questions, anything that doesn't make sense? Great. And then from your own experiences, what kind of sales stages do you have in your business? Does it look kind of like this, or do you have fewer, more? Anybody that does this, can you give me some feedback?
So I think, Mike, it depends. The answer is always like that. I have a couple of clients who are in software industry, and I think that this is extremely important in the software industry to have further stages after we have received even the payment. So this is about customer success and adoption for the cross-selling and upselling going forward. So I think that the starting point is really who is your right client and what is their buying process, and then your process is exactly right for your clients. And then we need to understand every time working with our clients, who is really the right client, how they buy, and what kind of processes we need to have in our case. Yes, for that. So I think that this is essential. And I think that also, and I know you, so I know that you work that way, that when it comes to the later stages, like proposal and contract and won, this is also extremely important to have the expected decision dates. because the decision, yes, is very likely, but when is that going to happen? Because thinking about forecasting and thinking about, what kind of impact it is going to have on our operations and our inventory, for instance, it is so important to really know when is that going to hit our order book and when do we need to deliver that.
Yes, that's a great point, Robert. Thank you. Any other comments or thoughts?
I'm not sure if it's directly related to this, but indirectly, I know it is. So I agree with Robert. Account growth is definitely a stage, probably. But there's a whole lot of information on metrics going with this. Like, I don't know if you're going to talk about account velocity or the ability to organize. Great, you've got those stages, but I've seen some customers who are not clear about which region are we talking about. We're setting targets for this sales rep in this region, but it's not very clear in the CRM what are those things,
Yes.
fall in ownership or geography or type of. So I'm sure you're going to go into that or not today, but I don't know. But it's related to this is great, and already if people have this, I can already do a cash forecast based just on this. But then there's a whole lot, level of information, as Robert said, after it's won, and also related to that particular customer opportunity that we will need in a model.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Patty, did you have something to say?
No.
Okay. All right. Great. Yeah,
Very
no, those are
similar
great
to
points.
What we do, Mike. Very much
Go ahead,
the
Tom.
same as what we do. We have a different series of sales stages, but it's approximately the same. We have a percent of commits tied to each stage. So the investigating stage, we're assuming 10% of those are going to go on to be a committed sale in the end. And so we go through a similar process. Because we had some challenges in forecasting just recently, we went through and retrained our channel managers just to make sure everyone was on the same page, just as you pointed out in the beginning, that everyone using the same set of identification, same facts.
Got it. Yep. Yeah. So, and for me, having those stages and having those percentages is kind of the foundation, and that foundation serves what we need to do from a measurement perspective. To me, these are the top 7. These are the key metrics. You may have different ones or additional ones for your business, or have a slightly different opinion, which I'll be interested in hearing that. But when I look at it, from the standpoint of sales pipeline, the first metric is the new leads capture rate. So that how many new opportunities are coming in, right? And you can look at that daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever. But what's your flow of stuff coming in that may become customers or deals that close? Next is that lead conversion rate. And so this is, if I get 100 in, how many actually become paying customers? So I want to keep track of that and understand how well I'm doing. To Brigitte's point, and we'll talk about that later, when you get into this, you can be slicing and dicing by region, by business unit, by segment, by sales rep, so these basics can be kind of analyzed across lots of dimensions and ought to be depending on the nature of your business. What I think is often neglected is the lead conversion cycle time. So going from, we've identified the prospect, they become a paid customer, how long does that take on average? It makes a huge impact to your business if that's normally 20 days or if it's 6 months, and depending on where you're at and what you do, 6 months may be actually pretty quick for some complex deals. So that's important to understand and understand by segment and by customer type. The average initial transaction value. So how much money are you getting for that first deal? And this goes back to Robert's point too. I talked initial, because hopefully you're going to have recurring revenue with that customer, or once you get in the door, you're going to be able to upsell or land and expand or help them in other areas. And so you'll see a metric that talks about additional to this in just a second. But what's that average initial transaction value? And that gives you a sense of how well am I doing? And am I going after the right size deals or right size customers? Next, average lifetime transaction value. So we like to take a look and say, okay, well, we've captured somebody. We made, we made $100 on that first deal, but they've been a customer for 4 years, and we make I'm using 100 because it's an easy number. I know it's really small, but every quarter we get $100 from them. So 4 years has been $1,600. So over the lifetime they're worth that. That makes a difference in kind of how you analyze how well the business is doing and what your expectations are. Sales stage fallout rate. I think this is really important. I like to understand, of those, for me, those 6 stages. For you, it could be less, could be more. But what's really that success criteria? Once I get into the proposal stage, for example, do I lose half of the deals that come through? Or do I go from 50% down to stage 2 is 25%, but where do they fall out? Because that tells you a couple things. One is it helps you frame your expectations, but 2, it also allows you to go, how come I'm losing so many from initial assessment to proposal? Why am I losing all these opportunities? And of course, later in the stage, it's much more painful to lose a deal or have it go to not close, because you've probably put a lot of time and effort into it. And so understanding where deals are falling out is really important from an analysis perspective. And then kind of hand in hand with that, we talked about the number 3 is that conversion cycle time, being from opportunity identification to I get paid. For each stage, each sales stage, we like to track what's the cycle time of that stage. And so that's kind of, Brigitte, like your velocity. It's a velocity of deals moving through. And again, understanding where we fail in a stage and how long it takes in a stage is really important. So from a standpoint of a sales pipeline, for me, these are the top metrics that I like to use, and that when I'm helping other folks, I advocate for these. Question, anything that you disagree with on this? Anybody go, oh, that doesn't seem like something we would measure? Any thoughts on that? And then, is there anything missing? You go, oh, Mike, you're missing the ball, because unless we have this measurement, we're not doing well.
It's not really missing, because you had it on the previous thing, but I deal with a lot of SaaS business, and churn, the term churn.
Yes.
Is definitely, so it's, you have it here because you have on the previous slides, you have the lost businesses, right? The churn, the reason for the churn. So that's super important. And also, I'm seeing SaaS business, and I'm learning, right. I'm a learner. I'm learning SaaS, those metrics which keep changing and being refined for SaaS businesses. But in addition to the lifetime value, we're talking about stick rate. And it's not exactly the same thing. And you can measure, what I'm finding with customers is, depending on how well they track the different phases of when people, you lose people at what date, when they stop paying, you can come with very confusing different ways of calculating LTV or stick rate. So again, it may not be the topic for today, but that's an area that I find very ambiguous right now. So,
okay,
but it's specific to SaaS business, probably.
Got it.
So I think it is important that we keep it very simple, and because that is a trap. If you try to measure, too many things, I think it is important to have, this anchor into a couple of points. And for me, this is always, starting with these 3 really base lines, which is, what is the size of the pipeline? And it could be both dollars as well as the number of opportunities or leads or prospects going through it. So size, velocity, and you are covering that very nicely here, Mike. And then the hit rates from stage to stage. Mm-hmm. And I think that when you have those 3, and depending if you have the SaaS model, if you have very traditional manufacturing, if you have technology, if you have maybe professional services, you are going to expand into different angles from this. But if you try to follow and measure and gauge, those 3 ones, you are going to be in a safe zone.
Yeah.
Because in the end of the day, that's very complex. And as you have said, alluded to this, it's going to be other verticals, customer types, a specific, product combination, service combination. Oh, keep it simple. You also, in the beginning, you just keep those three starting points, on the agenda.
Great. Thank you.
Robert, could you list those three again? It was the last one, hit rate?
Sorry. So it's about the size, it's about the velocity, and it's about hit rates
Hit rate, okay.
between
thank you.
stages,
And
not the final one.
I'd say on the size, I've noticed again a very basic ratio, but the dollar closed ratio to the dollar in the pipeline, I found was a very good predictor of the sales, moving forward and how fast it moves.
Mhm.
So it's not just the size.
Yes, however, there could be some nuances also, Brigitte and the others. And I think that Mike has covered that very nicely in this subset of KPIs, because sometimes, these dollars could be very misleading, because you might have a very giant, opportunity in your pipeline, and that's going to just blur the picture, the entire picture. So I think it's always, important to look at both the dollars and number of different, opportunities you have there to really understand how healthy this pipeline really is.
Do you do Paretos on your pipeline versus your sales? Because I've seen a customer with COVID quite changing those ratios of, how many customers represent how much, what percentage.
So I would say it depends, guys. I think that if you have really very solid and big pipelines, Pareto plays very nicely. If you have hundreds or thousands leads. However, if you have just a dozen or handful, just go one by one and just look at what is really the clusters of different sizes you have there, because this is not only about the size of those deals, but also about the customer type which is behind that.
Yeah, no, those are excellent points. And it's for a lot of us know ourselves on the call. So Robert and Brigitte and I kind of all work together or have plans to work together depending on what opportunities come, and it's part of that network of folks that can help help people get better, and we just kind of task organize to do what's right for the client.
But these 7 in front of us, they are really good ones.
Yeah. So, one of the elements of this from an operational perspective and from if you want to say IT perspective, the concept of the single source of truth is so important. And there are two sides to the coin on this. So one is from kind of the IT side of the house, that first definition, where the single source of truth means a data storage principle. So that piece of information is always coming from one place, right? So kind of like system of record concept. So that's very important, so that we're all looking at the same information. We know where it's coming from. The second aspect of single version of truth is one view of the data that everyone in the company agrees to, so that they go, this is the real trusted number. And the reason that's important is that way, one, it keeps everybody honest, and also it avoids, which I've seen more than I care to believe, dueling data sets, right? So if you've been in big organizations, you probably face that. You get in a meeting and then somebody says, here are the numbers. And then somebody across the table says, no, my numbers say, and then you spend all the time trying to dispute each other's numbers, and you're just going back and forth. So I mean, that happens operationally, that happens in other ways, maybe less so from a finance perspective, because it tends to be a clearer source of truth. But you want to, especially when you got multiple sales regions, you want to be able to have a source where everybody can go, okay, yeah, we believe the numbers. We all agree we're going to spend time getting better. We're not going to spend time arguing over what the data says. Any thoughts or comments on that?
No, this is, even in finance, it happens, Mike. And we're here to try to not to.
Well, I'll just say we have 2 Salesforce instances running in our business. And it's obviously there's room for challenges to creep in when you're running
Yeah,
effectively two different systems.
right.
Yeah,
right.
merging companies, this is when you, and you may remember Mike from Applied Materials, but I certainly remember from Applied Materials, you acquire a company and then you have all sorts of issues.
Oh, yeah. No, that's, yeah, that's very common with acquisitions. You know, so you're on two different systems. It doesn't make sense to integrate them. It's too expensive. And then sometimes you may have an entire new business line organically grown up, and the systems that you have to run sales operations for the new line, the processes are completely different. And so trying to force fit it isn't the right thing to do. And so you end up having two parallel things, and sometimes that's a reasonable decision. You just have to understand why you made that decision and make a conscious one. So
I need two people to create silos. I mean, even very
yes.
small companies at
Well,
creating differences. So very good.
very true, very true. So so step three, so we talked about, you want to really define what's in your pipeline. You want to establish metrics. And then step three, I call it a sales control tower. It's bringing all this stuff together and taking action with it. And kind of the analogy that I make is, you know, COVID, the COVID-20, gaining weight. And I went, oh man, I've gained a lot of weight. If I don't get on my scale, I don't know if I've gained weight or not. And I go, oh, I want to lose some weight. Okay, if I get on my scale, I can tell if I'm gaining or losing. But if that's all I do, if I don't modify any other piece of behavior, if I just get on the scale, I'm you know, that may or may not make an impact. I mean, I've got to make decisions and take actions on the data in order to make a difference. And so that's always the analogy I use because it's near to my heart after this last year. And so when we think about that, I always talk about what I call the Goldilocks principle. So if you remember the children's tale, there's Goldilocks. She's in the woods. She gets hungry, and technically she breaks and enters into this house that belongs to the three bears. And she goes in and she finds some porridge, and one was too hot, one was too cold, one was was just right. And she sat on some chairs and she slept in some beds. You know, and the first bed was too hard, the second was too soft, and the last one was just right. Well, when you think about the systems, the control systems, really for all operations, but especially for sales, you want your sales support system not to be too big. You don't want it to be too small. You'd like it to be just right. And too big means maybe it doesn't fit it's too complicated, it's too bureaucratic. Too small would be there's not enough power in it to keep track of stuff. So just right is, can you make it fit? And so making it fit means, you know, you're providing the right amount of control for the size and scope of your business and your processes and your sales operations, right? Our approach, my approach is, if it's possible, you want to fit the system and the platform to your business. You don't want to force your business into the platform. You don't always have a choice. Sometimes it's like, oh, we just got to use this. We're going to turn ourselves into a pretzel to make it happen, but that's what we're going to do. So, you know, but if you have to, just use what you have, do the best you can if you are locked in. But ideally, whatever you're using, you can use it in a manner that it really supports your business, and you're not the other way around. And in my experience, this is probably, when you're working with sales folks, this is probably more important than any other department. And what I mean by that is because sales folks tend to be, you know, they're out there, they're important, they're running and gunning. Operations folks kind of are willing to put up with like crap, and this is the bureaucracy I got to do because it's part of our nature. But a lot of times sales folks don't have time for that BS, right? They say, I got to make a sale, and if you're giving me extra bureaucracy and all these controls, I'm just going to ignore them. and I'll just compliance enter some stuff when I have to, but I'm not going to really use a system. So that's what I mean about being able to have the platform support the business that you need and not trying to force otherwise. And so when I talk about that, I think in terms of what I call a control tower, which is really the dashboard for running your sales operations. And for this focus today, the sales pipeline. And regardless of what you have as a system, whether you're in HubSpot or you've got Salesforce or you're on Excel or whatever you're doing, you want to get started. Just like me trying to lose weight and jumping on my scale, you got to do something. So do something, then make it better. Keep in mind that what you're trying to do is drive decisions, actions, and results. So this isn't just like, oh, we're going to put up some nice, pretty charts, or we're going to have a review and everybody can just look at it. No, you're going to drive decisions. You got to make something happen. What turns a dashboard into what I call a control tower is it enables action from the dashboard. So ideally, if you've got a dashboard, people are going to seeing what's going on. They can take action. They don't have to swivel chair. They don't have to send an email. They can go in and drill down, or they can enter information. That's what I think is ideal from an efficiency perspective. And so those are principles that if you can do that, it's fantastic. When we talk about in terms of kind of putting that out in front of people and visualization, you need to know your audience. And so if you can customize so that, the VP of sales is going to see one thing and the sales director will see another, and the sales reps will see something else. It should all be the same information, but it ought to be appropriate to their level. So they don't have to drill around, hunt around, that sort of thing. If you can, tell it in one screen. If you can fit it all on one screen, that's harder than it sounds. But because that's harder than it sounds, we ought to put the important information and place it on top. So when you think about whether you're going to do something with a Salesforce dashboard or whatever you're going to do, this goes hand in hand with, if you've got a tool, if you have metrics, people have to look at them, people have to use them, or they're not doing you any good. And so this is how you can make that more effective for people to use it. Let me pause there. Any questions or comments? I'm going to show you an example that's just an example. Okay, great. So this is an example that we use from a demo perspective. And I'll show you a live version in a minute, but basically this is more for like a consulting company. It's a variation of what we use to run our own. What we've done here is at the top, we've got, this is for sales. We have like an inspirational sales quote. And then we have what the goals are for that particular person. And then we have links to take action. So links to enter an opportunity, links to look at the base data, and then coming in and some metrics, key metrics like what are the dollar amounts year to date in the various stages, and then some of the counts. Here we've got the opportunities by sales rep, and then the opportunity status by stage. And then here we've got cycle times. Okay, so cycle time for closed and versus lost, cycle time for in flight. And then in here is a list of all the different prospects and kind of the information that's relevant. And so, and this is demo data, so it's kind of old. And so now these cycle times look like really ridiculously long. So it's just because it's all fake data in there. But when you think about, hey, how do I want to have kind of everybody working together? If you're going to make a dashboard / control tower, again, what you want, can you get your key metrics up there? Can you show a snapshot, trends, visualizations being, some people see things in different ways. A bar graph versus a line graph versus a stacked bar may be more effective in conveying the information. And so you take that into account. Depending on the size of your business, you want to kind of do customers versus market segments, all that slicing and dicing that we talked about. And I think it's important to put some healthy competition in there. So some comparisons of the sales reps or the sales teams, comparing different regions versus business units. I mean, it's good to understand from a business trend, but it's also good in my opinion, from a motivation perspective. And then links to key resources. So being able to access the source data right from the control tower, I think, is important with the appropriate permissions, and being able to go into reports and to take action items and that sort of thing. So that's kind of the approach that we take. And let me pause there, and I'm going to show you kind of a live example and tell you how we do it, and we'll go from there. So questions or comments on kind of visualizing all of your metrics in one place?
When you talk about actions, you said you're going to show some examples.
Right.
I'm very interested in what can you do from a control tower, because we call it dashboard, but it's usually not linked to action in finance.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, so I'm very curious about what actions, are triggered from the
Yes.
control tower.
Great question. So let me move this over here. So kind of a deeper dive, and the platform we use a lot is Smartsheet. We use Smartsheet with Power BI, but take these same principles with your Salesforce dashboards or whatever else you're using. And I described the components, but from the standpoint of, for example, taking actions, we've got an opportunity entry form, for example. And so we can, I won't fill it out here, but, and then the prospect stage. So we can in our dashboard, if we had, if we have an opportunity that comes in, we can go ahead and enter it straight into the database. We can attach files and do that sort of thing. We can hit a submission. I need to enter some numbers to. My typing is atrocious, so. Oh, I have something in here where I've got to enter something.
You did spell the numbers right, though.
Oh, I gotta designate who the sales rep is. But so quick and dirty. That the other thing is like action from the standpoint of being able to go right into the database itself, to click on that and go in and see the see the opportunities. Again, we use Smartsheet for that because we like the ability to have conversations around what's going on and attach documents and that sort of thing. And then from the standpoint of metrics, again, the cycle time, doing things like that, clicking in to understand what's going on. And then from a reporting perspective, I like to have the ability to say, well, what are the current opportunities? And you can see here that in real time, then my my test just came in. So you can see it there. But then things looking at wins report, so here's for deals that we won, this is what happened with them. Losses, this is what happened with them. And then some of the other things that is really powerful. And so if you're, regardless of what you're using, if you're using Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever else, but if you're not using Power BI, you're really missing out on some huge capabilities. So this is a demo from another client that we had that needed to do a very complex forecast based on shipments and bookings. And so the interactivity of Power BI is just really incredible from the perspective of being able to do things like let's interact with various segments of the business. We can click on product 30 and see what's going on with that product. We can go in and choose a particular quarter, all that sort of thing. So that's not that's more visualization that gives you information of what's going on. Same type of things with kind of changes in orders. So we'll integrate Power BI into a dashboard this way and take a look at what happened. This is an example from wafer fabs where every week the customer adds tools and subtracts them, and you want to keep track of them. But anyway, that's just not to go too much on a tangent, but just the ability to visualize stuff, have it where folks can see what is relevant to them, and again, being able to take action. And that action could be things as simple as, maybe you've got some training videos or some job aids, and you have a link for those right there on your dashboard. So, maybe it's a marketing pitch, maybe it's something like that, so that as much as possible, then as you're working through your sales pipeline, the folks that are working on it don't have to leave the system to go do other things. And so that's just an example. And let me go back in. Questions on that? I went through that really quick because I wasn't here to do a demo. I can do one for you afterwards if you want, but I just wanted to give you a flavor.
Quick question, are you able to attach sales contracts to, when you said don't leave the dashboard, are you
Yes.
able to go drill down, access the actual contract when it's good? Okay.
Yes, yeah, every row, which is an opportunity, you can attach pictures, contracts, documents, you can have conversations around it. The other thing that is, now you're getting me excited, I'm gonna jump back to it for a second.
So you built this dashboard in Smartsheet?
I built this in Smartsheet. If you're on Salesforce, a lot of folks use Smartsheet with Salesforce because it allows them to kind of use information back and forth, and they're not as restricted by Salesforce, and they don't have to pay the expensive Salesforce consulting to get reports in and that sort of thing. But Brigitte, to your question, we can go in here, and I'm gonna show you something here. So one of the cool features is to highlight changes. So if something changed, you can see it automatically. But yes, if you want to attach things, you can give attachments, and they're there. So it could be sales notes, it could be a contract. You can come in and have a conversation about an opportunity, like, okay, the NDA got signed, for example, and then do calculations in here. So we've got Robert, to your point, one of the things we do is that expected close date, and then compare that to the actual close, all that sort of thing. So you can, for us as a small firm, we got rid of HubSpot because this worked better for us than HubSpot. And then for larger firms, a lot of folks will use this hand in hand with HubSpot or with Salesforce or with their existing CRM system, just because it gives them a lot more power to do things. From the perspective of not being locked in and being able to do that stuff where you have the control tower match your business, and you're not like force feeding everything into a tool that maybe is not working as well. So let me, we got 9 minutes left. Let me jump into the next section. So what should you do next? So some of the important things are, if you want to know how, how healthy is your sales pipeline, ask these questions. So basically, have you done what we outlined here? Oops, let me go back. Do you have everything defined? Is everybody on the same sheet of music? And then, are you actually you doing metrics? Are you taking action on those metrics? And then I think, Robert, you made this point too, kind of what's the shape of your sales pipeline? So, I mean, is it really fat, meaning that a lot of deals are stuck in the middle? Is it like an hourglass? You get you get a big funnel and it moves through really quick. I mean, all those have some implications to the health of the business. From a number perspective, are there enough prospects in the thing? Question. Thanks, Brigitte. Yeah. And is it moving? And then again, are you purging deals? So my dirty little secret is, in my businesses, I tend to hold on to deals too long, because I'm like, I know I can convince that person they need this. And I had to discipline myself to make things lost and then circle back to somebody a few months later. And then, do you know which deals within the pipeline to focus on? So you're going to have a lot in there, but as you segment and look, which should get your most attention? That's really important to know. So take this. I will publish this afterwards, but these are the questions that I would ask if I sat down with you and looked at your processes and go, how well are each of these things happening and how consistently? So it's actually more than a yes, no, because it's oh, yes, and say, okay, all the time, some of the time, every now and then, and everybody, most of them, or there's a few stars that actually do this. So questions or comments on that? Great. And then the other thing that when I look at a sales organization overall, I look at it from an operations perspective and really look at what I call an operations maturity model. And really from a, is your organization, is it ranging from initial and immature all the way to optimized best in class? And I look at this from a project organization or a sales organization, or any one of your operational aspects of your business. But if you're really ad hoc, you're at the far left. And if everything is running very well defined, it's managed, it's mature, there's continuous improvement, your metrics are great, then you're all the way to the right. And so understanding where you are in maturity is really important to know as well. And then you can decide, well, how quickly do I want to move from left to right? And what's it worth to do that? And we've got 5 minutes left. So just a little bit of an ad here. So forgive me, but so this is a recent testimonial back from May. There was a small medium business manufacturing firm, and we actually went in with Smartsheet to help them with their manufacturing line and keeping track of flow on the factory floor and design flows. But as part of that, to go end to end on the process, we also did their sales pipeline, because it was like, well, the deals are coming in, and before they hit manufacturing, we got to keep track of them. And that actually was what they needed more. And so what happened was a competitor in the market went out of business, and all of a sudden they got 3x the orders. And they were like, Mike, if this had happened a month earlier when we were on Excel, we would have not been able to keep up with it. But with the sales pipeline you built in Smartsheet, now we see everything that's going on. We can see our processes and all that. And so a little bit of a Smartsheet advocate here is, I consider it a Swiss Army knife and a Lego block. So often we'll go in and do a sales pipeline solution for somebody, but then we can do a whole bunch more stuff. So if you haven't checked out Smartsheet as a tool, even if it's an add-on tool to your systems, you ought to do that. And I'm always happy to help with that. And then finally, how can I help you? If you're interested in looking at your sales pipeline health, or if you'd like a makeover of your pipeline, give me a call. If you'd like to understand where you are in sales operation maturity, if you'd like to maybe even build a control tower, I'd love to do that or explore that with you. And then just general operations consulting and support. And if you want to, just message me on LinkedIn, give me an email, or book a call, and I will. I'll stay. We'll stop recording here in a second, and I'll stay on if there are any other questions, and we can talk right now, or just reach out to me. And I will have the recording of this. If you want to look at anything again, I'll have the recording and the slide deck available shortly in the next day or so. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and I'm going to stop the recording.